Hey everybody, welcome to my garden. Thanks Linda for giving me another opportunity to show my garden. The last time you saw my garden was in 2020 in October, so it's been 2 years. Then my garden was 8 months old. It's now just over 2.5 years old. And I'd like to show you the transformation over the 2-year period. So welcome to my therapeutic garden. And we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. This garden is in zone 8A. This is one of my garden helpers. He's Leo. And where's Teddy? And this is, let's just go. And this is Teddy. Some treats. So Teddy and Leo are as therapeutic as my garden is. Anyway, enjoy. So I'll start in our patio like I did the last time, and I will show you some of my plants that I have here. So this is under our pergola, which is right near our screened porch, so it's ideal. It gets a lot of morning sun, so I like it because these plants are not exposed to the harsh direct afternoon sun. So here's some boxwood in some terracotta pots. They are really doing well. I love boxwood, and from the time I've been watching Linda on YouTube, I just gravitated towards boxwood, lemon cypress, and myrtle topiaries. So and then this is one of the foxtail ferns that I have. Also inspired by watching Linda's videos, and I have quite a few of these foxtail ferns. What's cool about it is from one I now have many. So when I first started my garden 2 years ago, I bought one foxtail fern, which was this one, and from this one I now have several foxtail ferns. That's a planter with some hydrangeas, and there's a little boxwood in the middle there. But I want to also show you this guy, which is a ficus. I'm gonna have to bring him in later this week to overwinter, because the temperatures in our area are going to drop to the lower 30s, and I think that's not gonna be good for him. So he's doing very well in this section of the patio, and has really put on some awesome foliage. I love the foliage, but I do realize that these are also temperamental plants, and they lose their leaves when exposed to temperature changes. So I'm gonna have to bring him in. Next to him or beside him is an olive in a topiary form, which I think is cool. And then of course, inspired by Linda, I have lots of lemon cypress. I find that while they are high maintenance, they do well in my garden, in these terracotta pots. Of course, they require lots of care and maintenance, but they're cool. I love them. And then of course, I also enjoy shaping little trees and plants into bonsais, like this gardenia, which I shaped into a bonsai form and planted it up in this bonsai pot. It's doing pretty good and settling in very nicely in this container, and it's looking pretty cool on this patio table. And then of course, one of my myrtle topiaries here, which is also one of my favorites, and again inspired by Linda. So that's a little bit of my patio plants, and I want to show you another favorite of mine, which I really love, and that is this dwarf black olive, which I also shaped into a bonsai form. I think it's really cool. I'm gonna have to bring him in later this month when the temperatures fall, because I think he wouldn't be able to do well, or he wouldn't do well in freezing temperatures. Well, that's a little bit of the plants in my patio. I thought I'll show you this before I take you to my garden. So before I leave the patio section of my garden, I wanted to show you some of my other plants I have here. I love having plants in the patio. I think they add such aesthetic value and just create such great interest. Like this juniper bonsai, which I shaped and pruned. I feel like everything in my garden should have a story, and I did this one after one of our cousins in South Africa passed away recently, and I did this to remember him. And then I have moss. I just love moss. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's got such great tactile benefits, and I love the lush green color of moss. Here's a little boxwood planted in a little terracotta pot, and then I also have this azalea bonsai, which I shaped and pruned, and I'm very proud of it. I think it's a gorgeous little bonsai. And then here's another lemon cypress, which is also doing well. As I mentioned, the lemon cypress is just such a high maintenance plant, but it's also so therapeutic and brings such great aesthetic value. And then here's another foxtail. I love this foxtail fern. It's gorgeous and also has great tactile benefits. I find that the foxtail to be incredibly therapeutic. And I love this holly, especially at this time of year with all those berries. I think it just adds such great interest in the garden. I also have Muehlenbeckia or wire vine planted in this little container. That's another inspiration from Linda, because I didn't know about the wire vine after watching her. Now, about 2 years ago, when I showed you my garden the last time, I showed you my emerald green arborvitae or arborvita planted in this section and providing great screening. Now, look at it. Look how it's grown. It's just gorgeous. I mean, they've like grown in height in 2 years, and I'm amazed by how well these emerald greens have grown. There's some myrtle topiaries, and then behind the emerald greens I have some Oakland hollies, and then there's some sunshine ligustrums as well at the back. I'll show you the hollies. So as you walk from this section of my garden, you could check out the hollies, and look how nicely they've grown, providing such great screening for our pergola and our patio there. So again, just lush green foliage. And then here's the other sunshine ligustrum I talked about. One of the ideas I got from Linda's videos is placing blue containers randomly in sections of the garden, like I've done with this one. So I wanted to show you this section of my garden, which I think is very therapeutic. I just love it. The fish are just amazing. You can check that out. This for me is absolute therapy. So as I walk around my garden and I check out the pond and watch the fish swim, I just think it's cool. And I didn't have this 2 years ago when I first showed you my garden, but you can check it out now. It's just amazing and very therapeutic. I think this for me brings real healing and therapy. So I built this pond in May this year because I wanted my garden to have some water, and because it has all the Japanese kind of signature touches, I just find it incredibly therapeutic and awesome to spend time in this garden. So I want to show you this cedar, which I also have in the shallow container. I just think it's doing so well. It's growing really nicely. And it's an evergreen, so in the winter time it's gonna look especially good in this section of my garden. I also like shaping mugo pines into bonsai forms. And then here's a little dwarf Alberta spruce, which I shaped into a bonsai as well. And this section of my garden is, I call this my therapy garden, because you could check out this frog in meditation. I just think he's so cool. And then I have some Japanese maples here, like this Shishigara, which is really gorgeous. And check out these azaleas, really doing well. So here's another idea I got from watching one of Linda's videos. I think Stuart calls this a bottle bouquet, but it was an idea I got from watching one of Linda's garden tours. I think it was her friend John, and I just think it's so cool to have this blue bottle bouquet against the backdrop of that sunshine ligustrum. And then of course I have this garden bench and those cool stepping stones, which is really just gorgeous, awesome. And this juniper as well is really a great feature in this section of my garden. So I love how it's shaped. And it goes well with the Japanese theme of my garden. Now the other fun thing I have in my garden are these stacked rock, which I think is just gorgeous and very cool. Here's more bonsai that I shaped from juniper ground covers. So this is a nice view of my garden from this angle. It's really cool. I also love placing rock on the lawn to create a feature like stepping stones. And then as I walk further down, past my fish again, that's a nice view of this section of my garden. So the last time I did not have this tree, which is I think a Yoshino cherry tree, which is really doing well. Well, it's gonna lose its leaves now in the fall, but really doing well. So therapeutic. So another great change in my garden is how nicely these Chindo viburnums have grown. When I last did this video, these viburnums were so short and tiny, and now 2 years later, look how they've grown, and they actually provide such great screening in this section of my garden. I just love this Japanese bloodgood. The sun is quite strong here, so it's difficult to see, but its leaves are starting to change now. So I also have Nandina planted at the bottom and some boxwood, but I want to show you this Mugo pine. So the Mugo pine is one of my signature touches. That's another thing I learned from Linda, the importance of signature touches in your garden. So I have this Mugo pine pruned at the bottom in this large shallow concrete container. You can check it out, and it really looks very zen. I love it. It makes a very nice feature in this section of my garden. And then I have a bullseye holly, which I think is such a great substitute for boxwood if boxwood doesn't do well in your garden. I also have this dwarf Alberta spruce, which is pruned up into a topiary form, which is pretty cool. There's more boxwood, so if I walk further down here, excuse the sun, I will show you this boxwood, and I'll tell you why this boxwood is special to me, because it was one of the first boxwoods I shaped into a topiary form after watching Linda on YouTube. This is a bay leaf, which is pretty cool. I love how slender and tall it's growing. Check it out. Really cool. And then as I walk to this section of my garden, I want to show you some of the tiny little bonsais I have. So I typically, as I mentioned, I shape juniper ground covers into bonsais. So these are my little bonsais. I find them to be so therapeutic, and I love doing this. I think it's pretty cool. One of my friends made this bench for me, and I think I showed it to you the last time, but it's really doing well. And I love Mr. Tortoise there, or Mr. Turtle. He's from Africa, and I'm from Africa too, so I love him. I really dig him. I think he's wicked in this section of my garden. I also have lots of Japanese hollies around. I think they go very nicely with the Japanese theme of my garden, which is pretty cool. And then here's another boxwood in this concrete hern, which is doing well. And then this juniper, I think it's a blue point juniper. It was doing pretty good in a container, but it was getting too large for the container, so I planted it in the ground. And it's doing very well in this section of my garden. There's a Japanese lantern. And then this planter is something I really dig because it's shaped like a watering can, so it's pretty cool, with some ornamental grass and sedum growing in it. This was given to me by my mother-in-law, who visited in the summer, and I really love it. It's really cool. I also have this Rheingold arborvitae or arborvitae, which is in a terracotta pot underplanted with wire vine. Really good. So cool. Wow, it's getting cold out here now. And then of course my Yoshino cryptomeria, which is really doing well. I showed you this the last time. It's the giant of my garden, and it's really an awesome tree. So what I did was I pruned the bottom to expose the trunk and to create some negative space at the bottom, which I obviously learned from Linda. I think I learned about planting stuff in shallow containers from watching Linda's videos, and I remember she had a pancake arborvitae in a very shallow concrete planter, more like a saucer. So I have a pancake arborvitae as well in this concrete planter, and it's doing well. There's some lavender, and then there's another azalea. Here's another boxwood I pruned and shaped into a topiary after watching Linda. This is a cherry blossom bonsai, which is pretty cool. More gorgeous plants. Now, this is another plant inspired by Linda as well. Gosh, I really emulated Linda in so many ways. So this is a pineapple guava, which is planted up in this container. I think it's so cool because its leaves reminds me of the eucalyptus, and I think it's gorgeous next to or beside that Buddha there. And then rosemary in bloom, which is really cool. I love those little purple blooms. So this is my colonnade or emerald colonnade holly, which is really doing very well in this large concrete planter. So the other thing I learned from Linda is that you can break the bottom of the container or the planter. So this is it's in a baseless container. So I removed the bottom. That way there's good drainage and the plant does well. So this holly is really doing well. Here's another shishigara, which will lose its leaves pretty soon. And at the back you could see a mahonia, and then also a foxtail fern, another foxtail fern. This guy stays outside all winter, so he overwinters pretty good in this section of my garden. I also love this variegated boxwood, and then of course another juniper, which is a kind of a topiary but goes well in my Japanese style garden. As I mentioned, I learned from Linda that it's okay to plant your some of your plants in shallow containers. So if I look at these ones, So I have a juniper, a mugo pine, and a black dragon cryptomeria, all planted up in shallow containers, and they are doing pretty good. This black pine is also one of my favorites and is really doing well. Again, it's planted in a large whiskey barrel, and the bottom is broken off or knocked off for good drainage. There's Buddha. You might have seen him the last time I've done this video, and he's doing well. And then of course this juniper is also doing well, and it's in a topiary form in this container, underplanted with some viola or winter pansies. So this is my cryptomeria doing well. I love this colonnade holly. It's pretty cool. There's more stacked rock, which is very aesthetically pleasing and great. And then of course this container is underplanted with creeping thyme. I love creeping thyme. I think it's so aesthetically pleasing, and the tactile benefits are great as well. So I wanted to show you this section of my garden where I have roses, and the roses are my favorites. Now they look a bit scraggly now because obviously they're going into dormancy shortly because we're in the fall, but there's still some blooms and there's still growth, and they are as beautiful as ever. I love roses. These are knockout roses. I feed them rose tone every 6 months, and I spray them with rose care every 6 to 8 weeks in the growing season. And I know they do very well, and they need to be deadheaded often, so that's a bit of a high maintenance thing, but I think it balances off when you consider the joy these roses bring. So I also have boxwood in this section of my garden. So here's some conical shaped boxwood topiaries that are doing well under this crepe myrtle. Here's another one. And then I shaped this boxwood, it's a green mountain, into a spiral form. It's amazing how all the Osta are going away now, because we're getting into late October here in Charlotte. I love this boxwood, so I got this topiary after watching Linda about 2 years ago, and he's doing very well in this container, and you can check out all the new growth. So I use top boxes on this, as Linda does, and it's really proven to be great. I also have this Japanese maple, which I think is a crimson queen or lace leaf. It's doing well in this baseless container. I say baseless because I removed the bottom. And I've done the same with this boxwood in a similar container. I have a little bistro section going on here, and I love having
these little containers. Now this has a goshiki false holly in it. I have lots of these planted in my garden in the ground, but I shaped this little one and planted it in this little container. Now I also have a bonsai goshiki, which I will show you later. I think this metal finial is cool. It makes an awesome feature in my garden with its weathered look. Just love it. And so does the stacked rock, which is in a spiral form. I also think it makes a great feature in my garden. Take a closer look. This is a Siryu Japanese maple. Its leaves are starting to change now because it's fall, but it's a gorgeous plant, and I love this maple because it's in the fall. Its foliage is just so great. And then I want to show you this redbud tree, which I planted in the spring of last year, but it's doing so well in this section of my garden. And providing great shade. I'll just take a pan around one more time so we can check out the red bud from this section with the roses. So I'm at the back of my garden and I want to show you some of the plants I have in this section of the garden. When I started my garden about 2.5 years ago, I had to do a lot of soil amendment. So I put in a lot of soil conditioner, raised the beds, added a lot of compost, and I also put in peat moss and a whole lot of stuff to make sure the clay is sorted out, because in Charlotte, North Carolina, we have lots of clay. This is a dwarf river birch tree. Now I was told it's dwarf, but it's actually growing pretty large, so I'm not sure. I think the label was misleading. But anyway, it's doing well in this section of my garden, and I love the trunk. It's just gorgeous. I also have some ornamental grasses. Now at this time of year, the ornamental grasses are really gorgeous in the fall. And here's a goshiki false holly, which I talked about earlier, and then there's some camellias in the ground, planted in the ground and also planted in containers. I also have lots of tea tree olives at the back, and that's another look in my garden from this angle. And then also I love having items of interest in the garden, like this little boy and his dog. It reminds me a lot of myself as a little kid. And then this Yopon holly, which is so cool at this time of year with all the red berries. There was absolutely nothing planted in this section of the garden apart from 2 large maple trees, which you see up here. So there's one on one end of the garden, and then the other end we have another maple. But apart from those 2, I didn't have much in this garden, so I had to start from scratch. So basically a blank canvas, which has its advantages because you can plan your garden as you like. This is a Hollywood juniper planted in a container, and then some Carolina sapphire cypress at the back. They're doing very well and will provide some great screening. And then I have this Oakland holly, which is variegated or golden. It's a golden Oakland holly, I think. Yeah, and it's doing pretty good. And then I want to show you this white pine, which is also beautiful, and it makes a great feature in this section of my garden. It's also planted up in a whiskey barrel container, and the bottom is broken off. More Mugo pines, because as I say, they are my signature touch. And then I have on this arbor, I have Lady Banks roses. Yeah, this is a Lady Banks rose, which gives off these beautiful yellow blooms in early spring. I love this bell. It's kind of therapeutic. And then as I walk down, there's another juniper. As I mentioned, love adding items of interest in the garden. There's a golden euonymus there, which is doing well. And then I want to show you this Goshiki false holly, which I shaped into a bonsai form, also doing well. And then this cedar. This cedar I planted about 2 years ago, and it's really doing well in this container. There's more plants there. And then I love this pagoda, which I'll show you the pagoda from this angle. I think it's really cool. Makes a great feature in this section of my garden. So, as most of you know, and as mentioned in Linda's book, I have epilepsy and I also have Asperger's syndrome. And I find my garden to be absolutely therapeutic, and it's just awesome spending time out here. I am so pleased to have created this little oasis at home that I can enjoy and my family and friends can also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending time with me in my garden. I wish you all the best and stay safe. Bye.